Tonight we're doing something a little different. No markets, no merchants. No one is going to teach you how to negotiate ribbon prices. Tonight we're going through a door. A specific door. A specific door on a specific street in London in the summer of 1665. You know what's painted on that door before I tell you. You've known since the moment I said summer in London in 1665. The red cross, 12 inches tall, painted in the middle of the door in the kind of red that doesn't fade even when it rains. Someone painted it there by order of the parish, by order of the Lord Mayor, by order of a city that was running out of options and running out of time. Below the cross, in black paint, 4 words that might be the most terrifying 4 words in the English language when you understand what they actually meant. Lord, have mercy upon us. Picture a city of 500,000 people. Now imagine that city in August, the heat sitting on it like a hand pressing down, trapping the smell of the river and the coal smoke and the refuse in the streets, holding it all close to the ground where people breathe. Now imagine that within that heat, within that smell, there is something else. Something that started in the poorest parishes in the spring and has been moving outward since then, unhurried, methodical, as if it has all the time in the world. Because it does. Add the sound of cartwheels on cobblestones at 2 a.m, the lantern swinging from the front of the cart, the driver sitting hunched, a cloth pressed to his face, the man walking beside the cart ringing a small bell, not loud, not joyful, the opposite of joyful, and calling out those 2 words you never want to hear outside your window on a summer night. Bring out your dead. That's London in 1665. The same London that has St. Paul's Cathedral and the Royal Exchange and coffee houses full of men arguing about philosophy and merchant ships carrying goods from every corner of the world. That London, the greatest city in the world according to itself. And that city is dying. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough of it. Enough that the weekly Bills of Mortality, those printed lists of who died and of what, have stopped being something you glance at over your morning bread and become something you read with your hands shaking and your mind doing arithmetic you don't want to be doing. This week, 400 dead of plague. Last week, 700. The week before that. The week before that. The numbers only go one direction. I make these sleep stories, and I genuinely cannot tell whether any of you actually sleep to them, or whether you're the kind of person who just wants to lie in the dark and be told true things about a world that no longer exists. Either way, I'm not judging you. If anything, I understand completely. Because the thing about a plague house, the thing about stepping through that door, about seeing what's left behind when everyone is gone, is that it makes you understand something about life that's very hard to understand any other way. It makes you understand how quickly ordinary things become precious, how a half-eaten loaf of bread on a kitchen table can become the saddest thing you've ever seen, how a child's wooden toy, left on a windowsill, can break something in you that doesn't quite go back together. So get comfortable. The door is right in front of you. The red cross is right there, and we're going in. You didn't choose this job. That's the first thing you should understand. Nobody in London in the summer of 1665 chooses to be the person who goes through the Red Cross doors. Not if they have any other option. Not if they have any other means of feeding themselves. Not if they have any kind of leverage or connection or alternative at all. You have none of those things. You're 17 years old. Your name is Thomas Marsh. You came to London from a village in Hertfordshire 14 months ago with a letter of introduction to your uncle, who was supposed to set you up as an assistant in his tallow chandler's shop in Cheapside. Your uncle died in March, not of plague, of a fever, an ordinary fever, the kind people die of all the time without anyone painting anything on their door. Just dead. His shop sold. His widow gone back to her family in Surrey. And you, Thomas Marsh of Hertfordshire, left standing in a city that suddenly had no use for you and very little sympathy for your situation. You found work where you could, carrying things, sweeping things, the kind of work that pays barely enough to eat and requires no skills except willingness to show up and be strong. And then the plague came, and then the city started changing. And then, 6 weeks ago, you found yourself standing in front of a man named Ezekiel Cobb, who was the parish clerk of St. Giles Cripplegate, one of the poorest and hardest hit parishes in London. Ezekiel Cobb was a thin man with a permanent expression of mild disgust, as if the world had been consistently failing to meet his standards for 30 years, and he'd accepted this fact without quite forgiving it. He looked you over the way you'd look over a horse you were considering buying but suspected was slightly lame. "You're fit," he said. It wasn't a compliment, it was an assessment. "Yes, sir." "You've had the plague?" "No, sir." "You might get it." "Yes, sir. Most who get it die." "You knew this, you said nothing." "The ones who don't die," he continued, "are generally immune after that. Body learns to fight it, the physicians say. Or God grants mercy, depending on who you ask. Another pause. "The work pays 3 shillings a week, plus food. You'll work under Margaret Fenn, who is the parish searcher. You'll do what she says when she says it. You'll go where she tells you to go, and you will not steal from the houses." He said that last part with particular emphasis. "I won't steal," you said. "Everyone says that." He picked up his quill. "Most of them mean it too at first." And that was it. That was how you became one of the people who goes through the Red Cross doors. Now it's a Thursday morning in early August, and you're standing in front of one of those doors on Swan Alley in a narrow lane off Coleman Street in the heart of the city. The door is oak, solid, maybe 50 years old. The Red Cross was painted 3 days ago, which means it's still bright, still fresh. Someone from the parish did this while the family was still inside. Locked them in, the way the law requires. "Lord, have mercy upon us." The words are written in a careful hand. Whoever painted them was trying to do this right, trying to give it some dignity. You stand there for a moment in the August heat, your hand not quite on the door, looking at those words. Margaret Fenn is behind you. She's 50-something, short, built like someone carved her out of old wood and left her out in the weather. She's seen more plague houses than she can count, and she has not, so far, died, which she considers less an achievement than simply the way things have gone. She carries a white wand, the sign of her office as searcher, and she smells faintly of the juniper and rosemary she burns in the small brazier she keeps in her room to ward off infection. She smells of camphor. She smells of vinegar, which she puts in her shoes. She smells of the plague season. "Door," she says. You put your hand on the latch. The smell hits you before the door is fully open. I need you to understand what this smell is. I need you to understand it in your body, not just in your head. This is not the smell of one person who has been ill. This is not the smell of a sick room, which is bad enough on its own, which you've encountered before, and which your brain already knows how to categorize as wrong and dangerous and back away. This is the smell of a house that has been sealed. For 3 days, the Lord Mayor's orders require that when plague is confirmed in a household, the door is locked from the outside and a watcher is posted to make sure no one leaves. 3 days minimum, often longer. The family inside, the sick, the dying, the already dead, and anyone unfortunate enough to be healthy and in the wrong house at the wrong time, locked in together. 3 days in August. London in August is already fighting a losing battle against its own smell. The river at low tide, the tanneries, the privies, the accumulated refuse of 500,000 people living in a space that would struggle to comfortably hold a third that number. Now add a sealed house. Now add the specific biology of Yersinia pestis working through human bodies. Now add the August heat. The smell comes out of the open door in a wave. Physical. Weight-bearing. Your eyes water automatically. Your throat closes. Your body, which knows things your mind is still catching up with, takes a step back before you've consciously decided to move. Margaret Fenn makes a sound, not quite a word, something between disapproval and acknowledgement. She reaches into the bag at her hip and produces a small bundle of herbs, dried lavender, rosemary, something else you don't recognize, and holds it to her face. She hands you one. You take it. Hold it to your nose. Breathe through it. The herbs help. A little. The way an umbrella helps in a hurricane. A little. The smell is layers, like the city itself, but concentrated, compacted into the narrow space of a single house. Top layer. Something sweet and wrong. The sweetness of decay in summer heat. Your brain wants to call it overripe, but there's no fruit here. This sweetness has no pleasant meaning. It's the smell of biological processes that have moved past what anyone wanted and kept going. Under that, sourness. The smell of a sick room, vomit and sweat, and the particular smell of a fever that breaks and breaks again. Bedclothes that haven't been changed. Bodies that haven't been washed. Not because anyone was negligent. Because there was no one left to do it. Under that, something sharper, metallic and wrong. You'll learn later what this is. You don't want to know now. And underneath all of it, underneath everything, the baseline smell of the house itself. Wood smoke and tallow candles and the particular smell of human habitation over years and years. Cooking and sweat and the small daily accumulations of a family who lived here, who slept here, who ate breakfast at the table in the front room and argued about money and laughed sometimes and worried about the children getting enough sleep and all the 10,000 small ordinary things that constitute a life. That smell is still here. Under everything else, that smell is still here. And somehow that's the worst part. You step inside. The house belonged to a haberdasher. His name was Robert Ackerman. You know this because Margaret has the parish register, which she consults in the way a captain consults charts, practically without sentiment. Robert Ackerman, aged 41, haberdasher, resident of Swan Alley, Coleman Street for 8 years. Wife, Anne, aged 37. Children, 3. Thomas, aged 14. Mary, aged 11. James, aged 7. All deceased. Certified by the searcher who came before you 3 days ago, when the watcher posted at the door reported that no one had come to the window in 24 hours, and the smell had become notable even from the street. The whole family. 6 days. That's how long this took. From the first sign of plague in the household. Probably in one of the children, they went first, usually the children, to this. An empty house with a red cross on the door. You stand in the shop. The front of the ground floor is the shop. Of course it is. In this city, in this century, the shop and the home are not separate things. The house is the business and the business is the house. The front room has a counter. A long wooden counter worn smooth by years of elbows and transactions, with a front panel that folds down to create a display surface when the shutters are open. The shutters are closed now. The thin bars of August light coming through the gaps illuminate dust motes moving in the still air. The shop is small, maybe 12 feet wide, 15 deep, shelves along both walls, floor to ceiling. And on those shelves the inventory of Robert Ackerman's life. Buttons, hundreds of them, in glass jars and wooden boxes and small paper packets tied with string. Bone buttons, brass buttons, silver buttons, wooden buttons, buttons carved in the shape of flowers, buttons stamped with the arms of families who ordered them special, buttons for coats and buttons for waistcoats, and small flat buttons for shirts and larger ones for cloaks. Ribbon, bolt after bolt of it, rolled onto wooden spools and stacked in cubbies, every colour. Silk ribbon from France, or at least claiming to be from France, though half the silk ribbon in London comes from Spitalfields weavers who've learned to make it look French, because French means quality, and quality means price. Wool ribbon for working clothes, narrow ribbon for trimming, wider ribbon for dressing, thread, needles in little paper sheaths, pins in flat cushions of dense felt, small scissors with handles like bird beaks, lace, wrapped around small cards to keep it from tangling. This is what a haberdasher sells. The small necessary things. The things people don't think about until they need them. The button that fell off the good coat, the ribbon for the girl's hair, the extra thread for mending. The haberdashery shop is not glamorous. It's not the silk merchant or the goldsmith. But every person in London has needed a haberdasher at some point. Robert Ackerman built this. The shelves are organised with care. Everything has its place. The buttons by material, then by size. The ribbon by colour, then by width. This is the work of someone who understood their trade, who took pride in the order of things, and it's all still here. That's the thing that stops you. It's all still here. You'd expected emptiness. You'd expected evidence of a hasty departure. Things knocked over, drawers hanging open, the visible signs of crisis. And maybe there is some of that. There's a jar of buttons on the floor, lid off, a scatter of brass buttons across the worn floorboards like thrown coins. Maybe that fell in the chaos of those last days. Maybe someone knocked it over carrying a sick child downstairs. But mostly order. The ribbon on its spools, the thread in its caddy, the pins in their felt cushion. A man organised his shop, as he had organised it every morning for 8 years, and then he got sick, and then everyone he loved got sick, and then they all died, and the ribbon is still on its spools. Your hand reaches out. You don't intend it to. Your fingers touch the edge of a spool of blue ribbon. Sky blue, a particular clear blue that must have cost Robert Ackerman more than the plain ribbon on the shelves below, and you feel the smoothness of the silk, and the solid weight of the wooden spool, and the slight tackiness of the end of the ribbon where it's been tucked under itself to keep it from unrolling. Someone touched this. Someone's hands chose this ribbon, and wound it onto this spool and put it exactly here, at eye level, where a customer would see it first. Those hands are gone now. You put the spool down carefully, exactly where it was. Don't linger, Margaret says behind you. She's entered the shop, her bundle still at her face, moving with the deliberate efficiency of someone who has done this many times. We're here to search, not to mourn. You didn't know you were mourning, but you were. There's something on the counter, a piece of paper weighted down at the corners by a button jar and a candle stub. You lean over to look at it without touching it first. You've learned already, in 6 weeks of this work, that you don't touch paper in a plague house, unless you have to, because no one quite knows how the sickness moves, and the physicians argue about it endlessly, and until they stop arguing, you'd rather not take unnecessary chances with paper that a sick man might have touched. It's a bill, a customer's outstanding account. Mrs. Henderson, Threadneedle Street, 3 yards silk ribbon blue, 1 gross brass buttons, 2 paper needles, owing 4 shillings and 6pence. Robert Ackerman wrote this down. Robert Ackerman was owed 4 shillings and 6pence by a Mrs. Henderson on Threadneedle Street. He was keeping his accounts. Even then, even while his children were sick upstairs, or already dead, or whatever was happening in those last terrible days, he was keeping his accounts, because the money was owed and someone needed to collect it and the business needed to go on. The business is not going to go on. The parish will inventory this shop. A representative of the Worshipful Company of Haberdashers will come and assess the stock. The goods will be valued and the debts paid, and whatever's left, if there's anything left, will go to Robert Ackerman's nearest surviving kin, assuming anyone can be found, assuming anyone wants to come to this house to claim it. Mrs. Henderson's 4 shillings and 6pence will probably never be collected. You look at the bill for another moment, then you move on. Behind the shop, through a low doorway that requires you to duck your head, is the room where the family actually lived. This is where it changes. The shop was a workspace, organised, functional, professional. It told you about Robert Ackerman the tradesman. This room tells you about Robert Ackerman the man, the husband, the father. It's a combined kitchen and living space. Low ceiling, heavy beams, a fireplace on the far wall, cold now, the ashes grey and settled. The fire went out days ago, and no one relit it because there was no one left to relight it. A long wooden table, scarred and stained with years of meals, 4 chairs around it, mismatched but clearly a set in this family's logic, the way furniture becomes a set through use and habit even when it wasn't bought together. And on the table, the breakfast. You stop in the doorway. There is a breakfast on the table. Not much of one. Not a full meal, but enough. A loaf of bread, half eaten, the cut face hardening now, slightly green at one edge where the summer heat has been working on it. A pot of something, dripping probably, rendered fat for spreading, sitting in the centre of the table with a small wooden spatula stuck into it, the handle worn smooth by whoever used it most. A cup on its side, whatever was in it long since evaporated, leaving a brown ring on the wood. Someone was eating breakfast. Someone sat at this table and ate breakfast while the plague was in the house. And then they stopped. And they didn't finish. And they didn't clear the table because there was no after, there was no later, there was no I'll deal. With that, when I come back down, they just stopped. The bread is still on the table. Something moves in you. Something that isn't quite grief, because you didn't know these people and you never will, but something that is adjacent to grief, in the way that a shadow is adjacent to the thing that casts it. Something that understands, in your body more than your mind, what it means to stop in the middle of a meal. Margaret is behind you. You hear her breathing through her herb bundle. Bread, she says. She's noting it for the inventory. She takes things like bread seriously because she has seen what happens when word gets around that there's a plague house being searched and food being left. People come. The wrong kind of people. Desperate people. People who will eat from a plague table because hunger is more immediate than fear. And in the summer of 1665, there are plenty of people in this city for whom hunger is very, very immediate. I see it, you say. Your voice sounds strange too. You. Thin. You know where the smell is coming from. You've known since you opened the front door. The smell tells you. The smell is specific. You've been in enough houses to know what dead means, what it smells like in a hot room, in a sealed house, in August. The smell is coming from upstairs, but Margaret moves differently first. She goes to the fireplace, she checks it. The cold ashes, the iron pot hanging on the crane above the hearth. She opens the pot. You see her face barely move, but there's something in the slight tightening around her eyes. Porridge. There's porridge in the pot, days old, the surface grey and crusted, the smell reaching you from where you stand and adding itself to everything else. Someone was cooking. Someone was cooking porridge and eating bread and living, and then they weren't. Margaret closes the pot. She moves to the large cupboard against the wall, the livery cupboard where food is stored. She opens it efficiently. Inside, bread, more of it. A hard cheese, a large wheel of it, the surface waxy. Dried peas in a sack, onions strung on a rope, salt in a glazed crock with a wooden lid, some small beer in a stone bottle, enough food for a week, maybe more. They weren't starving, they weren't poor. This is a prosperous household. Robert Ackerman had food in his cupboard and ribbon on his shelves and accounts receivable on his counter. None of it matters now. Margaret makes notes in the small book she carries. Stock. Food. She's thorough and she's quick and she doesn't stop moving, which you've come to understand is a coping mechanism as much as a professional method. Help me with the table, she says. You help her move the table slightly to the side, checking the floor beneath it for anything that might have fallen. Coins, jewellery, things that need to be accounted for. There's a small knife under there, a paring knife, nothing dramatic. Margaret picks it up with her wand, examines it, puts it on the table, notes it. Knife, she says. One knife. One half-eaten loaf. One overturned cup. You think about the moment the cup went over, whether it was knocked by a hand reaching across the table, whether it was the beginning of something, the first sign, the sudden feeling of something wrong, the cup going over as someone lurched to their feet. Stop thinking like that, you tell yourself. Keep moving. The staircase is against the back wall of the ground floor, steep and narrow, built for a house where the square footage was more precious than the comfort of the people climbing it. There's a rope fixed to the wall as a handrail, worn smooth and slightly greasy from years of hands. The treads creak under your weight, each one a different creak, a different pitch, and you think about the family knowing the sound of these stairs, knowing which step was loudest, knowing how to come downstairs quietly at night without waking the children. The smell is stronger as you climb, much stronger. You breathe through the herbs. You breathe slowly. You concentrate on putting one foot in front of the other, on the physical mechanics of climbing stairs, because if you think about anything else you might stop moving. Margaret is behind you. The first landing, 2 doors. Bedroom first, she says. I'll take the front. You understand. The front bedroom will have the most in it. The main bed, the good furniture, Robert and Anne Ackerman's room. Margaret is experienced enough to handle that. You take the back door. The back room is smaller. Of course it is. A room under the slope of the roof with a low ceiling on one side that anyone taller than about 4 feet has to watch their head around. There are 2 beds in here, narrow wooden frames with straw mattresses, covered with wool blankets that might have been grey or might once have been another colour. It's hard to say now. The mattresses have been used. The blankets have been used. The children slept here, all 3 of them. Thomas, 14, Mary 11, James 7. You can see the individual impressions of them in the mattresses. This is a thing that happens when mattresses are old and straw-filled and frequently slept in. The straw compacts where the body lies, creates a hollow, a shape, a memory of the person who slept there. 3 shapes. You stand in the doorway and you look at 3 shapes in 2 narrow beds, and you breathe through your herbs and you do not go in yet. There are things on the windowsill. This is the thing about children's rooms in any century. Children collect things, small things, interesting things, things that an adult would look at and see nothing, but a child sees potential and value and meaning. On the sill of the single small window, pushed against the frame to catch whatever light comes in, a wooden horse, roughly carved, maybe 4 inches tall, with a chip in one ear that someone has attempted to repair with a smear of something brown, mud or wax or dried porridge. Actually, the mend is careful. Someone minded about the chip. 3 acorns, arranged precisely equidistant. Someone arranged those acorns on purpose. A piece of glass. Clear glass, rounded at the edges by water or handling. The kind of glass that comes from somewhere else and ends up found in the street by a child who recognizes it as extraordinary even if they can't say why. A feather. Long and dark, probably from a crow. The tip is bent. A prayer card, the kind sold for a halfpenny at church doors, with a printed picture of some saint whose face has been partially worn away by repeated touching. These things are on the windowsill. These things are on the windowsill, and the children who put them there are gone. And you're standing in the doorway of their room in August 1665, and the smell is very bad, and you're going to have to go in. You go in. The beds are empty. That's the first thing you establish quickly, the professional habit Margaret has been drilling into you. Check that. The beds are empty. Because sometimes they're not. Sometimes someone is still in the bed and you don't realise it until you're standing next to them. These beds are empty. The blankets are pushed aside, not folded the way blankets look when someone left in a hurry or was helped out. The mattresses show their shapes. The straw smells of the particular damp sweetness of long human use. You note 2 beds, straw mattresses, wool blankets in fair condition. You note small chest against the far wall, which you open with the tip of Margaret's spare wand rather than your hands, because the inside is dark and the habit of caution is keeping you alive. Inside the chest, children's clothes, folded carefully. A Sunday suit for a boy, dark wool, with small brass buttons. The kind of buttons you just saw in the shop downstairs, which means Robert Ackerman probably put these buttons on his son's coat himself. A dress, light wool, cream colour, folded over a piece of paper to keep it from creasing. Under the clothes, a small book. You hesitate, then you pick it up. It's a primer, a child's learning book. The cover is worn soft with handling. The pages are stiff from a water stain that warped them once and then dried. Someone has written a name inside the front cover in careful, not quite confident letters that speak of a child learning to write rather than someone who writes easily. Mary Ackerman, her book, 1664, Mary Ackerman, 11 years old. Her book. You turn a few pages. The alphabet illustrated with woodcuts. A for Adam, B for Bull, C for Christ. The standard alphabet of the Protestant primer, designed to teach reading and piety simultaneously, on the assumption that one thing might as well carry the weight of 2. In the margins, Mary Ackerman has drawn things, small drawings in ink, careful and deliberate. Animals, mostly. A rabbit, recognisable despite being the size of a thumbnail. A cat with what you think might be whiskers but could just be the way the pen was resting. On one page, a small house, very simple, with a door and 2 windows, and in the windows 2 round faces. She drew her family. Or she drew something. You're putting meaning into it that might not be there. You don't know what Mary Ackerman was drawing when she drew 2 faces in 2 windows. Maybe she was practicing circles. Maybe she was just drawing what was in front of her. But it looks like her family. You close the book. You put it back in the chest exactly where it was. You will find, in the months and years after this summer, that you do this in every house. You put things back. Not because the parish instructions say to. They don't. But because it seems like the only thing you can do. The only small courtesy available to you. You didn't know them. You can't help them. But you can put their things back where they were. You find her in the front bedroom. The room is large by this house's standards. It's the full width of the front, with a window looking out onto Swan Alley, the light coming in across the bed. The bed is large. A proper bed. Not a straw mattress on a frame. A real feather mattress. Curtains around it. Dark wool, partly closed. And the bed is not empty. Anne Ackerman is in the bed. You've seen this before. You've seen it 6 times in 6 weeks. You know intellectually that you will see it again. You know that Margaret has been doing this for years, and before her someone else did it, and there is no end to this particular kind of knowledge. Knowing all of that doesn't make it easier to stand in the doorway and look at the bed. Margaret is standing at the foot of it, her wand held professionally before her, her herb bundle at her face. She's doing her examination, the quick practice survey that the role of parish searcher requires, checking the body for signs, the marks of the plague, the evidence the Bills of Mortality need. She sees you in the doorway. "Come in," she says, not unkindly. "You'll need to know this." You come in. The window is shuttered, and the room is dim and warm, and the smell is... You breathe through the herbs. You keep breathing through the herbs. The smell is what it is. "The tokens," Margaret says. She indicates with her wand without touching. She explains in the same flat professional tone she uses for everything, which is not callousness, but the only way she has found to do this work over years without being destroyed by it. The tokens are what the plague looks like on the body. The swellings, buboes, the physicians call them, in the groin and armpit and neck. The blackening of the skin in some cases, the other signs. This is what you certify, she says. You look, you verify, you write plague in the register, clear cause, unambiguous. She says this last word with emphasis. She's told you why this matters. When the cause of death is unclear, the parish has to bring in a physician, and physicians cost money, and the parish of St. Giles Cripplegate is not a wealthy parish, and is spending a great deal of money this summer on matters it never budgeted for. Unambiguous means you do the job efficiently, and the parish doesn't have to pay for a physician. Robert Ackerman is not in this room. "Where is he?" you ask. Margaret tips her head toward the door without looking away from her examination. "You'll see," she finishes. She makes her notations. She's professional and thorough and careful, and as she works she speaks quietly. Not quite to you. Maybe to herself, or maybe to Anne Ackerman, the words low and rhythmic. You can't quite hear what she says. You don't try to. She's been doing this for 9 years. You don't ask what that costs her. You don't have the right to ask that yet. There's a 3rd room on this floor. Barely a room. More of a deep closet. A space under the forward slope of the roof with a ceiling low enough that you have to crouch. Inside, a truckle bed. the kind that slides under the main bed when not in use used, by a servant or sometimes an older child when the family grew faster than the house. Robert Ackerman is in the truckle bed. He's on his side. His hands are in front of him, fingers slightly curled, the posture of someone who fell asleep waiting for something. You look at his hands, a haberdasher's hands, broad, capable, with the particular small scars and calluses that come from working with cutting tools and wire and needles. One finger has an old cut on the pad, healed long ago, that left a white line. His thumbnail on the left hand is broken down to the quick and growing back in. He's wearing his shop clothes, his ordinary clothes, his Tuesday clothes, not his Sunday clothes. He didn't know he was going to die on a Tuesday in August. Nobody does. You've been thinking about this in the 6 weeks since you started doing this work, about the difference between how people die in stories, the deathbed scene, the gathered family, the meaningful last words, the decent time to prepare, and how people die in reality, which is usually in their ordinary clothes on a Tuesday with nothing arranged and nothing resolved and nothing finished. The haberdasher's accounts are incomplete. The bread is half eaten. The porridge is still in the pot. This is what death actually looks like. Not the stained glass version with the angels and the deathbed and the meaningful look at the beloved spouse. This, you don't go back into the main bedroom. You wait for Margaret in the narrow corridor, listening to her move through the room, the soft sounds of her professional examination, the scratch of her quill in her notebook, the small flat sound of a door being opened and closed. She comes out after a while. You walk back down the stairs together, through the smell, which is still there and will be there for days after you leave, soaked into the wood and plaster of the walls, impossible to clean completely, the kind of smell a house holds for months. In the back room, Margaret stops. She looks at the breakfast table, the half-eaten loaf, the overturned cup. "Clear it," she says. "The bread and the pot. Throw it in the yard. The cup too, if it can't be cleaned." She watches as you do this. Pick up the bread carefully, feeling its hardness under your fingers, the slight give where the mould has started, and carry it through the back door into the small enclosed yard behind the house. The yard is brick paved, weedy in the corners, with a wooden tub for washing and a privy against the far wall. You put the bread in the tub. You come back for the pot of porridge, which is heavier than it looks and which you carry with the handle wrapped in the cloth you carry for this purpose. When you come back in, Margaret is sitting on one of the mismatched chairs. Her herb bundle is still in her hand, but she's resting it in her lap. She looks tired. "Sit," she says. You sit across from her at the empty table. The morning light is coming through the shutters now, bars of it, lying across the table where the bread was. Dust motes moving in the air. The smell still here, but you've been inside long enough that you've stopped fully noticing it the way you noticed it at the door. This is something that worries you slightly. The fact that you can get used to this. "Do you believe in God?" Margaret asks. It's an unexpected question. "Yes," you say, because you're 17, and that's the only answer you know how to give. She nods, like she expected that. "I used to think this work was a test," she says, "that God put us here, the searchers, to witness, to serve, to do the necessary thing that other people can't do." She turns the herb bundle over in her fingers. "I don't think that any more." A pause. "What do you think now?" you ask. She considers this seriously, which is something you appreciate about Margaret Fenn. She doesn't dismiss questions. She considers them. "I think God doesn't plan individual deaths," she says finally. "I think he built the world a certain way, with sickness in it and health in it, with plague and plenty in it. And the rest is just, she pauses, weather. Some years it rains, some years it doesn't. This is a year of plague the way some years are years of drought. It's not personal. She stands up. The moment is over. She's gathering herself. It's not a comfort, she says, but it stops you being angry. And being angry takes too much energy when you're doing this work. She moves toward the front room, back to the inventory, back to the work. Don't touch the children's things, she says without turning around. The parish doesn't need them. They'll go with the house when it's cleared. She means don't steal them. You weren't going to. But she's been doing this for 9 years and she knows what people do. By mid-morning you've finished with the Ackerman house. Margaret locks the door behind you, the red cross facing outward, the words facing outward, and notates the time in her book and the names of the deceased and the cause of death for each. 5 names, 1 family, 6 days from first to last. You stand on Swan Alley in the August heat and blink at the brightness of it after the dimness inside. Your clothes are warm and slightly damp from the heat of the house. Your herbs are mostly exhausted, the scent faded, and you find yourself breathing carefully as if you're not sure yet whether outside air is safe or whether the smell has followed you out. It hasn't, or not much. The vinegar in your shoes is doing its work. The alley is not empty. There are people in it, neighbours who have clearly been watching the door, who step back slightly as you and Margaret emerge, who look at you with an expression you've come to recognise. It's a complex expression. It contains fear of you, because you've been inside a plague house and might carry it. Guilt about the fear, curiosity about what you found, pity, possibly, for the Ackermans, and under all of it, a deep private relief that it was not their door. An older woman, heavy-set, her grey hair under a white cap, stands at the door of the house directly opposite. She's pretending to do something, straightening a shuttered window frame, adjusting the shutter, but she's watching you. "They're all gone?" she asks. She's trying to sound merely practical. "All of them," Margaret says. She doesn't elaborate. That's not her job. The woman closes her eyes briefly, opens them again. "They were a good family," she says. "Robert was a good man. He'd give you credit, real credit, not the ruinous kind. When my husband was sick 3 winters ago, he let the bill sit for 2 months without a word." She looks at the door with a red cross. "The boy was clever. Thomas. He had Latin already. His father was saving to apprentice him somewhere decent. Thomas Ackerman, 14 years old, Latin already." "Mary-made lace," the woman continues. She seems to need to talk. "Beautiful lace. She used to sit in that window." She gestures to the upstairs front window. "Of a summer evening working at her lace. You could see her from here." She stops. "What happens to the house now?" "The parish," Margaret says. "The goods go to inventory. The house will be cleaned and aired. Could be 6 months before anyone moves in, if they're cautious. If." The woman nods. She's heard this before. Everyone in London has heard versions of this before. The houses stand empty, some of them for months. Some of them people move back into after weeks because houses in London are too valuable to leave empty long, plague or no plague. "I lit a candle for them," the woman says. "For all of them, even the little one." She means James, 7 years old. "That was good of you," Margaret says. Not flatly, she means it. The woman nods once more and goes back inside. The door closes. The alley is quiet again except for the distant sounds of the city. The bells, the cart traffic, somewhere on Coleman Street, the steady murmuring, undercurrent of 500,000 people going about their days. You walk to the end of the alley. And when I say London in 1665, I need you to understand what that means. Not the London of the history books, the dates and statistics, the numbers in the Bills of Mortality, the charts that show the death toll rising through the summer and peaking in September. Those numbers are real, but they're the wrong kind of real. They're the view from a very long way away. The London you're in right now is different from that London. It sounds different. You've been out on these streets every day for 6 weeks, and the sound of the city has changed in a way you can feel in your stomach, even if you couldn't describe it precisely. It's quieter, not silent. London is never silent. But there are silences in it now that weren't there before. Gaps in the sound of the street markets where there should be vendors shouting. Long stretches of quiet on streets that used to have a constant murmur of traffic and conversation. Part of it is that people have left. The ones with money, the ones with somewhere to go. They started leaving in June, when the plague moved out of the poorest parishes and into the middle ones, when it became clear this was not a contained outbreak but something larger. The wealthy merchants, the gentry, the professionals, they packed up their households and went to country properties and houses of relatives and rented rooms in villages far enough from the city to feel safe. The king left, took the court to Oxford, the lawyers left, the Inns of Court emptied, some physicians left. Not all. There were men of conscience who stayed, who understood their duty even when duty was potentially fatal. But some left, and the people who couldn't leave stayed. The shopkeepers, the tradespeople, the servants, the labourers, the people whose lives are here, whose work is here, who have nowhere else to be and no money to be it with. The people like you, Thomas Marsh, apprenticed to nobody, 17 years old, earning 3 shillings a week to go into the houses of the dead and note what they left behind. These people stayed, and they developed the particular psychology of people living through a catastrophe they can't escape. You see it in the streets, the way people walk, faster than usual, head down, a slight urgency even on errands that don't require urgency. The way they step around each other on the pavement, giving a wider berth than usual, the social calculation of risk playing out in the body language of 1,000 small daily encounters. The way conversations are shorter, the way people don't linger, and yet they also drink more. The taverns are doing good business. This is consistent across plague years. You've been told this by Margaret, by the older men at the parish, by anyone who has seen one of these summers before. People drink, they pray, and they drink, and some of them do both at the same time with no sense of contradiction. They go to church in numbers that haven't been seen since the worst years of the previous generation's wars. Every service is full, standing room, then spilling out into the yard room. People who haven't been to church in years finding their way back to the familiar pews, finding that the old words still fit, finding some kind of anchor in the liturgy even when the prayers don't seem to be working. They also, and this feels important, this feels like something about human nature that you need to hold on to. They also take care of each other. You've seen this. The neighbour who brings food to a house where someone is sick. The parish collecting for families who can no longer work. The watermen who don't raise their prices even though they easily could, even though people would pay them because they don't have a choice. The small persistent acts of decency happening in the middle of a catastrophe. The Ackerman's neighbour lit a candle. That's something. There's a shop on Cheapside that sells the Bills of Mortality every Thursday. You've bought a few. The bills are single sheets printed on both sides, listing every parish in the city and the number of deaths recorded in each one during the previous week. The numbers are organised by cause, not just plague, but all causes. The sheer variety of what kills people in 1665 is its own kind of education. Plague, consumption, fever, flocks and smallpox, griping in the guts, stopping of the stomach, dropsy and tympany, rising of the lights, teeth. People are dying of teeth, of the complications of dental abscesses, of infections that start in the jaw and spread, of pain that can't be adequately treated, and fevers that follow from it. It sounds almost comical until you remember that you've seen a man in your own parish walk around for 2 weeks, with a face swollen so badly he could only open his mouth an inch, and then not walk around anymore. The bills list causes for everything, including some that might mean whatever the searcher or the physician didn't quite understand and needed to classify somehow, suddenly appears as a cause. Frighted appears as a cause. Someone died of being frighted. The city records it. But the number that everyone looks at, the number that people read standing in the shop doorway or at the coffee house table before they've even sat down, that number is the plague deaths. This week's bill showed 4,030 deaths total, 2,819 of them from plague. 2,819 people in 1 week, more than 700 a day, more than 30 an hour, more than 1 every 2 minutes. Somewhere in this city, right now, as you walk down Cheapside with the smell of the Ackerman house still in your coat despite the vinegar, someone is dying. 2 minutes from now, someone else. 2 minutes after that, the city keeps going. Because it has to. Because the city is not a feeling, it's a function. Bread still needs to be baked. The river still needs to be worked. The carts still need to go out at night to collect what the night's death toll produced. The city keeps going, and the numbers keep rising, and Thursday comes, and the bills are printed, and people stand in shop doorways reading them and doing the arithmetic. You stop in at the parish office in the early afternoon to deliver the day's search reports. The office is in a room off the church, stone-floored, cool even in August, smelling of paper and candle wax and the particular dusty smell of official records. Ezekiel Cobb is at his desk, always at his desk, surrounded by the administrative machinery of an ongoing catastrophe. He takes your report without looking up. Then he looks up. The Ackerman children, he says. All 3, you say. Margaret has the specifics. He nods. He makes a note. There's a cousin, he says, in Bristol. We've sent word. Whether he comes or not, he pauses. Not everyone wants to come to London this summer. You can understand that. The shop goods, he continues. The stock. Company assessor will come Monday. Until then, the house stays locked. He turns back to his papers, then stops. Sit down, he says. You sit. This is unusual. Ezekiel Cobb doesn't generally want conversation. He puts down his quill. He looks at you with the expression that is not quite warmth, but is something that takes warmth into account. How are you managing? He asks. It's the wrong question. Or rather, it's the right question asked in a way that indicates it will be the only time he asks it. So you should answer it once and mean it. I don't know yet, you say honestly. He nods. Most people who do this work. He begins, then stops, then starts again differently. The ones who do it well, who last, who don't drink themselves to ruin or lose their minds or steal from the houses, they find a way to be present without being, he searches for the word, absorbed, you understand. You, Think you do? There's a distance you need to maintain, not coldness, not indifference, but, he taps the desk with one finger, professional distance, the way a physician has to have it, the way a judge needs to have it. He picks his quill back up. You struck me as a young man with more sense than most, he says. I'm telling you this because sense alone isn't enough. You also need the habit of distance. Start building it. He's looking at his papers again. The conversation is over. You stand to leave. The Ackerman boy, Cobb says without looking up. Thomas. He was signed up for a grammar school in Aldgate. I was to witness the indenture next month. A pause. Good Latin already, apparently. He turns a page. You leave. Not all physicians left. Dr. Nathaniel Ward did not leave. Dr. Ward is 47 years old, educated at Leiden, a fellow of the College of Physicians, and a man who appears to have genuinely thought the question through, whether to leave or stay, and arrived at an answer that he could live with in both senses. He has chambers near Cheapside. He sees patients in the morning, makes house visits in the afternoon, and contributes to the parish effort in whatever way the parish can use him. You meet him on a Tuesday afternoon, outside a house on Aldersgate Street where you've been sent to verify a death that the searcher on that beat has flagged as possibly not plague, possibly something else, which requires a physician's opinion. Dr. Ward is a tall man, thin to the point of architecture, moving with the deliberate efficiency of someone who has a great deal to do and has organised his movements to reflect this. He's wearing a long dark coat, gloves, and a wide-brimmed hat that shades his face from the August sun. He has a beak, not a real beak, a mask, the kind some plague physicians wear, a long curved projection from the face, like a bird's beak, filled with herbs and aromatic materials. The theory is that miasma, bad air, carries the plague and that the herbs filter the miasma. The theory may or may not be correct. Everyone argues about this. But the mask makes Dr. Ward look like something from a fever dream, which is perhaps appropriate. He sees you looking at the beak. Yes, he says, not unkindly. It looks absurd. Does it work, you ask? He considers this with scientific seriousness. I don't know, he says. I am still alive, which is evidence for it. I have treated perhaps 300 plague patients this summer, which is evidence that if the miasma theory is correct, the beak provides some protection. However, he pauses, looking at the mask in his hands with what might be philosophical ambivalence. I have also been more careful than many physicians about washing and about staying back from patients as much as possible, while still being useful. Perhaps that is what has kept me alive. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither, and I am simply one of the fortunate ones. He looks at you. How old are you? 17. And you go into the houses? Yes. He studies you for a moment with the detached clinical interest of a man accustomed to assessing people quickly. Eat well when you can, he says. Keep your constitution strong. Don't drink from unknown wells. Wash your hands and face after every house. Burn your clothes if you can afford to, or air them for at least a day. And, he pauses, don't be afraid of the work. Fear makes you careless. The careful ones survive more often than the fearful ones. He puts on his gloves. The house? He asks, nodding toward the door. Flagged as unclear, you say? Searcher thought the marks weren't right. Then let's go see. Inside, the examination takes less than 5 minutes. Dr. Ward moves through the sick room with practiced economy, observes, notes, confirms. His hands in their gloves probe carefully and professionally. He makes notes in a small book that he keeps in his coat pocket. Plague, he confirms outside. Clear presentation. Your searcher needs to spend more time on her training. He says this without particular criticism. The searchers are usually older women of the parish, not trained physicians, doing a job that pays very little and requires more stomach than most people have. He expects error and he corrects it and he moves on. The marks, he says, to you, because you are there and young and apparently learning. The buboes will be in the armpits, the groin, the neck, sometimes all three. The blackening you see is what the people call the tokens. Subcutaneous hemorrhage, the plague working through the blood. The delirium comes from the fever, the internal inflammation from... He stops. You don't need the technical mechanism. You need to recognize it. He shows you systematically what to look for, what the difference is between plague and the other fevers that also kill people this summer, that also produce swellings and rashes and death. The differences are there if you know where to look. The distinctions matter for the bills, for the numbers, for whatever understanding of this disease comes later, in years when there are people trying to understand it. Why does it matter, you ask? The distinction. If they're dead, they're dead. Dr. Ward looks at you. Because if we record accurately, he says, then someday someone will look at what we recorded and learn something, how it spreads, who it kills fastest, where it comes from and where it goes. He pauses. We will not solve this plague. It will end on its own, the way the others did. But the next generation might, if we give them good information. He turns to leave. You're not unintelligent, he says, which from Dr. Ward you are coming to understand is high praise. Keep asking questions. He walks away down Aldersgate Street, his long coat and absurd beak drawing the eyes of everyone he passes. You watch him go. You think about the information, the counting, the weekly bills, the careful numbers, the names in the parish register. Someone counting carefully the cost of this summer, so that later, much later, someone else might understand it. Thomas Ackerman had Latin already. You think about that. There are 3 more houses on Margaret's list for the afternoon. The first is on Grub Street, a lodging house where a single occupant, a journeyman printer named Samuel Finch, has been found dead in his room by the landlady. He lived alone, which makes the job simpler. His room is small, a bed, a chest, a table, a chair, a set of printer's tools hung on the wall with the care of someone who lives by their tools, several pages of printed text on the table, drying. He was working on something the day he died, or the day before. You can't read what it is. The text is too dense and you're moving too quickly. But you notice that the pages are even, the type well set. Samuel Finch was a good printer. His chest contains his clothes, a Bible, 2 letters tied with string, and a small purse with 3 shillings and 4 pence in it. 3 shillings and 4 pence. The money goes to the parish. The letters Margaret leaves, she always leaves personal letters, and they'll go to the next of kin if any can be found. The second house is on 4 Street, larger, a fuller family situation, and this one is harder because there are 3 small children and only 1 parent dead, and the other one still alive. A woman named Catherine Bridgewater, who answers the door herself, haggard and grey-faced and swaying slightly but unmistakably alive. She's been locked in here with her dead husband for 5 days. The law required it. Quarantine. The watcher at the door has been enforcing it. Margaret looks at her. The assessment is quick, professional, thorough, not plague. The woman is exhausted and grieving and possibly in shock, but she does not have plague and she did not die in this house, which is something. The children are behind her, pressed, together in the hallway, looking at you and Margaret with enormous eyes. She can be released, Margaret says to you, meaning you should note it. You should communicate it to the watcher outside. You should initiate the paperwork that allows this woman to walk out of her own front door. The woman starts crying when you tell her, not dramatically, just quietly, steadily, the way water comes out of a cracked wall. She stands in her doorway and cries, and her children come and press against her, and she puts her arms around them and she cries. You look away, not because you're uncomfortable with it, because it feels like the kind of thing you shouldn't watch. Private. Hers. The third house you don't have to enter at all. The watcher reports that when he checked at noon, the household had answered the window, and the sick man inside appears to be recovering. Margaret verifies, notes it, moves on. Recovery. This is the thing people don't talk about when they talk about the plague. People recover. Not most people. The mortality rate in this outbreak is brutal. 2/3 or worse once you've taken the sickness fully. But some people recover. The body fights. The fever breaks. The swelling drains and the person lies in bed for days afterward, hollow-eyed and weak, but alive. Recovery is real. It's important to remember that. It's important because the job you're doing this summer, the searching and the noting and the certification of death, is so saturated with death that it becomes possible, without meaning to start thinking of death as the only outcome, to stop imagining recovery. The man at the third house is going to recover. He's going to come out of that quarantine in a few days and walk out his front door and blink at the August sun and breathe air that is not the air of a sick room. Some people recover. You need to hold on to that. By the time you and Margaret are finished with the afternoon's houses, the sun is getting low over the rooftops. London shifts at dusk in August. The heat of the day starts to release, slowly, the baked-in warmth of the stones and the pavements beginning to exhale it back into the air. The light goes golden, then amber, then the particular red-orange that only happens in cities with serious quantities of coal smoke in the air. Beautiful in its way. And across the city you can see them beginning, the fires. Not fires of destruction, ordered fires, deliberate fires. The Lord Mayor has ordered that fires be lit in the streets day and night for 3 days of every week. The theory is the same as the plague doctor's beak, that burning, the smoke and heat and smell of it, purifies the air, drives off the miasma, cleanses what is unclean. Whether it works is disputed, whether it helps at all is disputed, but the fires are there. Every 100 yards or so down the main streets a fire burns in the road itself, fed with coal and wood, and in the poorer neighbourhoods, with whatever combustible materials the local residents can contribute. The fires cast shifting orange light across the building fronts. Sparks rise in columns. From where you're standing, at the end of 4 Street with London spreading out around you, you can see at least a dozen of these fires. The orange points of light moving in the dusk air, the smoke rising from them joining the general smoke of the city into something heavier, lower, redder in this light. It looks like the city is on fire, or like the city is doing penance. Both, maybe. You stand and look at it for a moment. The fires and the amber light and the church spires rising above the rooftops, and the sounds of the city quieting toward evening. Margaret stands beside you. Every summer I've done this, she says. There are fires. Some summers less needed than others. This summer, she pauses. This summer needs them. She doesn't explain what she means. She doesn't have to. The fires burn. The smoke rises. The city does its penance. There's a building on Aldersgate Street, a large merchant's warehouse, 4 stories built solid, where the owner, a man Margaret knows, has given her access to the roof. He's not here. He left for his country house in Surrey in June and hasn't been back. He gave Margaret a key before he left, for purposes he didn't specify and she didn't ask him to, because they both understood that there are times when a person who does the work she does needs to be able to go somewhere high and breathe and look at the city from above and remember that it is, in fact, a city, and not just a series of marked doors. She takes you there in the evening sometimes. Tonight she takes you there. The staircase inside the warehouse smells of wool and timber. It's used for storing baled goods, bolts of cloth. The upper floor's empty now. Your footsteps echo. The building is solid under your feet, the kind of solid that centuries of good maintenance produce. At the top, a door onto the roof, and then the sky. London from above in August in the plague year. The first thing is the light. The western sky still holding the last of the sunset, deep orange shading into red at the horizon, the colour spreading upward into something more purple. Stars appearing in the east. Not many yet. The sky is still too light, but a few, the very bright ones, forcing their way through. And below you, London, the immediate panorama that only height gives you. The rooftops like a grey-brown sea, irregular, breaking into the occasional prominence of a church tower or a larger roof or the particular cropped shape of a guild hall. The river in the distance, you can see it, a silver-grey gleam catching the last light, the curve of it, the dark shapes of the ships moored in the pool, and the fires. From up here, you can see them properly, dozens of them, scattered across the landscape of rooftops, each one a pool of orange-yellow light in the gathering dark. Moving slightly in the evening breeze, the flames leaning, recovering. A column of smoke rising from each, pale grey where it's dense, dispersing into the general haze of the city atmosphere. The city is doing something. It is acting. It may be doing the wrong thing, or not enough of the right thing, but it is not passive. It is lighting fires in its own streets and believing that this matters, and there is something in that act of collective belief that feels important. You can also see the night carts, just beginning their work at this hour, moving slowly through the streets visible from here, the lanterns at the front throwing small pools of yellow light, the bell carriers walking alongside. The sounds of it don't quite reach you up here, or maybe they do, and you're not processing them separately from the general wash of city sound, but you can see them, moving methodically, purposefully, doing the necessary thing. How long, you ask Margaret. She knows what you're asking. It peaks in September, she says. That's what the old ones tell. Me? The ones who remember the last bad year. 40 years back, September is the worst. And then it starts to fall. The cold comes and it falls. How much longer after September? By Christmas it should be. She pauses, watching the fires. It should be much better. Not over, but much better. Christmas. That's 4 months away. That's a great deal of searching yet to do. A great many Red Cross doors, a great many half-eaten breakfasts and children's toys on windowsills, and accounts receivable on counters. You stand on the roof in the warm evening air and watch the plague fires burn and think about the 4 months between now and the cold that will end this. Margaret, you say. The Ackerman children. the drawings in the primer. A pause. You saw those? I put the book back. She nods. She's still looking at the fires. I think about the ones who are going to be something, she says. The boy with Latin who was going to grammar school, the girl who made lace. I don't know why those ones in particular. She turns the herb bundle in her fingers. I've seen every kind of death. Soldiers and thieves and lords in their beds and paupers in the street. They're all equally gone. She shrugs. It's a slight shrug contained. But the children who are going to be something, those stay with you a bit longer. She turns away from the view. Come on, it's getting dark. You don't go back to your lodging directly. Your lodging is a room in a house on Silver Street. One room shared with two others, both of whom are also in plague-adjacent work this summer, a gravedigger's assistant and a man who works for the night cart company. They are both, by necessity, people who have found a way to function in this season. They are both, by informal agreement, people who don't talk much about work at home. The room is safe. The company is undemanding. But tonight you walk a bit first. The streets at night in plague time are different from the streets at night in normal times, which are already quite different from the streets during the day. The absence of street lights. The city has no permanent street lighting. There is candlelight from windows and the odd lantern hung above a door and nothing else. Creates a darkness that the modern mind struggles to fully imagine. Darkness as a physical presence. Darkness with depth and texture. But tonight, the plague fires light things. Every 100 yards the pooled glow of one of the Lord Mayor's fires. Orange light stretching up the fronts of the buildings on either side, creating something almost like a medieval illustration of hell. The dark street between two pools of fire, the faces of the occasional passer-by lit in orange and shadow from below. It is, honestly, a bit hellish. But also, it means you can see more than you usually could. The fires are a good idea, even if not for the reasons the Lord Mayor thinks they are. You pass a church, St. Alphege on London Wall, the small one with the truncated tower, and hear singing from inside. A service at this hour. Not an official service, not one of the canonical hours, just people gathered because they needed to gather. The sound of it coming through the closed door, muffled but recognizable. A psalm. Dozens of voices, not in unison exactly, but in something close to it. The sound of people who needed to say something together and found the words in a 400-year-old text. You stand outside for a moment and listen. You've thought about God a lot this summer, about the question of how a God who loves his creation allows something like this. You've thought about what Margaret said, weather, not punishment, not a test, and you've turned it over and examined it and found that it helps, the way her professional distance helps, the way the herb bundle helps, imperfectly, but it helps. You're not sure you believe in a God who intervenes, not after the Ackerman house, not after the truckle bed and the breakfast table, and 3 shapes in a mattress. But you believe in something. You believe in the voices singing the psalm. You believe in the neighbour who lit the candle. You believe in Dr. Ward who stayed, and Margaret who came to work every morning, and Ezekiel Cobb who made sure things were recorded accurately so that some future person might understand. You believe in people doing the necessary thing. That seems like enough right now. The singing continues as you walk on. On Cheapside, near the junction with Friday Street, you encounter a watcher. Watchers are parish employees assigned to sit outside quarantined houses and make sure no one goes in or out. In theory, this is a law enforcement job. In practice, it's 8 to 12 hours of sitting in a chair in the street with your back against a plague house, often in bad weather, frequently alone, for wages that reflect the city's mixed feelings about the job. The watcher on Cheapside is a man named Joseph, 50s, former night watchman with a big square face and a philosophical approach to discomfort that serves him well in his current role. He has a small brazier for warmth on cooler nights, a lantern, a stick, and a flask, whose contents are unknown, but whose purpose is not. He nods as you pass. "Busy day?" he asks. You stop. You like talking to Joseph. He's one of those people who has worked with death long enough to have a balanced relationship with it, aware of it, not afraid of it, not consumed by it. 4 houses, you say. How many? 6 total, 1 family. He nods. No false sympathy, no unnecessary horror. Family's hard, he says. Single ones are easier, professionally speaking. Yes. He adjusts his lantern. The cart came by twice last night, he says conversationally. Twice down Cheapside, usually once this early in the week. The night carts, you think about the number, twice down one street. It's getting worse, you say. Yes. He says it without distress, matter of fact. September will be worse, still they say. And then it falls. And then it falls, he nods. They always fall. That's the thing people lose sight of in the middle of it. It always falls eventually. This city has been here 1,000 years. It'll be here 1,000 more. He means the plague will end. He means London will survive. You know this intellectually. You knew it before this summer. But there's something about the way a man who has been watching a plague door for 3 weeks says it that carries as different weight than knowing it as a fact. It always falls. London has been here 1,000 years. Get some sleep, Joseph says. He means it kindly. You say good night and walk on. The room on Silver Street is on the 2nd floor, up a staircase that smells of the building's long history. Coal smoke and meals cooked below, and the particular smell of many people's lives compressed into a small space over many years. Your roommates are both in. The gravedigger's assistant, whose name is Will, is asleep, already face down on his mattress, still in his boots, which tells its own story about the kind of day he had. He snores with the deep reliability of someone whose body has decided sleep is non-negotiable. The night cart man, you know him as Edmund, you've never asked for a surname, is sitting at the small table by the window, eating bread and something from a small pot. He nods without speaking as you come in. You take off your coat and hang it on the hook by the door. You pour water from the jug into the basin. Cold, slightly metallic, but clean enough, fetched this morning from the parish pump. And wash your hands and face with the efficiency of someone who has learned to make this small ritual the dividing line between the day's work and everything else. You wash until the smell of vinegar and herbs and plague house is off your skin, or as off as it gets. You eat. There's bread on the table, and Edmund pushes a small pot of dripping in your direction without comment. You eat standing at the window, looking out at the dark street below, the distant glow of one of the plague fires visible around a corner. Bad day? Edmund asks. Manageable, you say. He nods. That's the right answer. That's the word you both live by this summer. Manageable. He finishes his bread, covers the dripping pot, goes to his mattress. Silence in the room except for Will's snoring. You sit on the edge of your mattress. You don't lie down yet. You think about Mary Ackerman's primer. The little drawings in the margins, the rabbit, the cat with the possible whiskers, the house with the 2 faces in the windows. You think about the shapes in the mattresses. You think about Thomas Ackerman, 14, who had Latin already, who was going to be apprenticed somewhere decent, whose brass buttons his father put on his Sunday coat himself. You think about the feather on the windowsill, the piece of rounded glass, the prayer card with the worn-away saint. You think about the half-eaten loaf, the porridge in the pot, the cup on its side, and you think, for the first time today, because during the day you don't let yourself think it, during the day you stay in the professional distance Ezekiel Cobb recommended, because that's the only way the day works. You think about what it would have been like inside the house those last days, what it would have been like to be Anne Ackerman in a house that's locked from outside, your children sick in their bed, your husband in the truckle bed so as not to take up room needed for nursing, knowing you can't get out, knowing there's a watcher at the door with a stick, knowing that your only job now is to tend what you can and pray and wait and see what's left when it's over, and knowing, somewhere in the knowing that the body does before the mind admits it, that it might not be you that's left, that nothing might be left, that this is what the red cross on the door means. Not just there is plague here, but also we've given up on this house. We've decided to let whatever happens happen and contain it here and move on to the next one. Lord, have mercy upon us, because no one else is coming. That's what those words meant. Not pious sentiment, a specific statement of fact. God's mercy was the only mercy available. You sit on your mattress for a long time, Will snores. The distant fire makes a faint warmth orange on the ceiling. 6 weeks. In 6 weeks you have been in 34 plague houses. You know this because you've counted. Margaret says it's better not to count, but you can't seem to stop. In those 34 houses you have seen, old people who died alone, who came to London for some purpose decades ago and built something here, and then the city outlasted them, and they died alone. Young people who died before they'd built anything, men and women your age, a bit older, a bit younger, people who were in the middle of becoming something and ran out of time. Children, you have seen the evidence of lives interrupted at every possible point, early, mid, late, good lives and desperate lives and ordinary lives and extraordinary lives, distinguished from each other only by the specifics of what they left behind when they went. And here is what you have learned. Thomas Marsh, 17 years old, searcher's assistant, formerly of Hertfordshire. Every house has something in it that breaks you a little, something specific, not the death itself. You have learned to stand at a respectful distance from the death itself, to keep the professional distance Margaret teaches, to do the work efficiently and well. Not the big obvious tragic things, those you can hold at arm's length. It's the small things, the bread still on the table, the primer with the drawings, the wooden horse with the mended ear, the blue ribbon on its spool wound there by someone's hands, the half-empty pot of dripping, these things, the small and ordinary things that prove a life was being lived, that someone was eating breakfast this Tuesday, that someone wound the ribbon carefully because it was the good ribbon and it needed to be kept properly, that someone, a 7-year-old maybe, a small child who liked horses but whose family was a haberdasher's family who couldn't afford a real horse, loved a carved wooden horse enough to fix its broken ear with a smear of something and put it in the window to catch the light. Those things don't let you keep the distance, not entirely, and you are starting to think, starting to suspect, that Margaret Fenn, who moves through plague houses with the efficiency of long practice, who never lingers, who notes everything and mourns nothing on the job, and goes home and burns her own herbs and says her own prayers and gets up the next morning and does it again. You're starting to think that Margaret is not as distant as she appears, that the distance is not the absence of feeling but the container for it, that the professionalism is not coldness, but the form that allows grief to be carried without breaking under it. This is what this job teaches you, Thomas Marsh, not about plague, about how to be a person while being a person in the world. You're awake before the bells, not because you can't sleep. You slept. Properly. Deeply. The sleep of someone who spent 8 hours in and around plague houses and walked several miles and breathed vinegar all day. That kind of tired is fundamental. It gets into your bones and your legs and your lower back and it pulls you down. But you wake early because it's August in London, and the light comes early, and the city starts early, and something in you has recalibrated over these 6 weeks to the rhythm of this particular work. Your body knows what time it is. The room is still grey. Will is awake, pulling on his boots with the practised urgency of someone who knows his work starts early. He nods at you without speaking. Edmund is still asleep. You wash, you dress, you put on the coat that still smells faintly of vinegar even after hanging all night. You pull on your boots and lace them and stand up. In your coat pocket you have the herbs Margaret gave you for the day, fresh ones, tied in a small bundle with thread. Lavender, rosemary, wormwood. They smell clean, sharp, alive. You hold them for a moment before putting them in your pocket. Outside, London is waking. The church bells begin, not all at once, but in the sequential, overlapping way of a city with many churches in it, each one slightly different in tone, each one marking the same hour in its own voice. St. Giles Cripplegate first, because it's closest, then St. Alphege, then the more distant ones layering in, until the air is full of bells. The sound is exactly the same as it was yesterday, exactly the same as it will be tomorrow. This is the thing about the plague that the bells make you understand. The city does not hold its breath. The city does not mark the occasion of its own catastrophe by stopping. It rings its bells. It opens its shops. The bakers bake and the watermen row and the printers set their type, and somewhere, in a small room on the first floor of a building in Cripplegate Parish, Ezekiel Cobb is already at his desk with his quill and his registers, recording the names of the dead so that there will be a record. So that someone, someday, will know. You go downstairs. Margaret is already at the church office when you arrive. She's talking to a young woman you haven't seen before, new to this clearly from the way she's standing, the particular kind of stillness that's actually a contained distress. Maybe 20, large dark eyes, wearing the kind of clothes that indicate she was, until recently, slightly better off than she is now. A widow, maybe. Someone who lost their income this summer and found their way to Ezekiel Cobb the way you did. Margaret is explaining the work. You stand in the doorway and listen. The same flat professional voice, the same information, the signs to look for, the proper method of examination, how to protect yourself, the vinegar in the shoes, the herbs, the washing after, but also other things. You will see things, Margaret says, that stay in your memory longer than you want them to. Objects. You will remember specific objects. A piece of clothing, a child's toy, something ordinary and specific. This is normal. This happens to everyone who does this work. The way to manage it is to put the object back where you found it. Say a prayer if you're a praying sort and keep moving. She pauses. The work is necessary. Someone has to do it. The work being necessary is what keeps you going when you don't want to go. The young woman nods. Her hands are clasped in front of her, tight. The houses are sad, she says. It's a statement, not a question. She's not asking for confirmation. She's saying it out loud because saying it out loud is the first step in being able to hold it. Yes, Margaret says. She says it directly and without softening. The houses are very sad. Every one of them. You'll not get used to the sadness. What you will get used to is the work, and the work is separate from the sadness. She gives the young woman the herbs for the day. She looks up and sees you in the doorway. Thomas, we start at 9. This is what you understand. After 6 weeks and 34 houses and more objects than you can count. The objects are not just objects. The haberdashery trade, which Robert Ackerman ran for 8 years on Swan Alley, is specifically about objects, about the small necessary things, the button, the ribbon, the thread, the things that hold other things together, the things that make the finished garment possible. And the objects left behind in a plague house are the same. The small necessary things of a life. The primer with the drawings, the wooden horse, the brass buttons on the Sunday coat, the things that hold together the idea of a person. When everyone is gone, these things remain. And they do something specific, these remaining things. They insist. They insist that the person was real, that the life was lived, that the specific, irreplaceable particularity of this one person, not people in general, not the numbers on the Bills of Mortality, but this one, was real and mattered and went about their Tuesday morning and ate their breakfast and mended their wooden horse and arranged their acorns on the windowsill. The objects insist on this. This is why you put things back. Not because the parish instructions say to, not as a professional habit, but because putting things back is the only way you have to acknowledge what the objects are saying. This person was real. You came through here. You saw. You knew. Put things back. The blue ribbon on its spool, the primer in the chest under the Sunday clothes, the wooden horse on the windowsill, put things back. Ezekiel Cobb was right. Margaret was right. The waterman Joseph was right. September. It got worse before it got better. The Bills of Mortality for the second week of September 1665 would record more than 7,000 deaths. Total. In 1 week. More than 1,000 of them in a single day. The fires burned. The carts rolled. The searchers searched. You were part of it. And then, as October brought cooler air down off the moors and across the city, the numbers began to turn. Slowly at first, tentatively, the way a heavy cart begins to move. An enormous reluctance, a moment of uncertainty, and then the forward motion gathering. By November, you could feel it in the streets. Something releasing. People standing in doorways without the same acute terror in their faces. Conversations happening again in the old way, the long way, the way conversations happen when you're not calculating risk with every breath. The bills showed it. Week by week, downward. 7,000, 5,000, 3,000, 2,000. By December, hundreds. By the new year, dozens. Never 0. The plague did not declare itself finished and depart with ceremony. It faded. The way the light fades in the evening, not a single moment of darkness, but a gradual withdrawal until you realize at some point that it's night. The city came back. The ones who had fled began to return. The wealthy ones first. The court, the lawyers, the merchants who had country houses to go back from. Coming back to their houses, their businesses, finding things mostly where they left them. Finding some things changed beyond recognition. Finding neighbours gone, friends gone. Finding the red crosses on the doors already fading, the paint bleaching in the autumn rain. In March of 1666, you're 18 years old and you've been in 73 plague houses. The plague work is essentially over. There are still cases. There are always still cases. The disease does not vanish completely. It retreats into the margins of the city where it lives between the outbreak years. But the searching, the emergency searching, the 6 houses a day searching, that is done. Ezekiel Cobb tells you on a Wednesday in March that the parish is reducing the searchers to peacetime staffing. 1 full-time searcher, which is Margaret, and part-time work as needed. He does this in the same flat professional tone he uses for everything, but he pauses before dismissing you, and he puts down his quill and he says, "You did good work, better than I expected." Coming from Ezekiel Cobb, this is something extraordinary. "Thank you, sir." "You have skills," he says. He means you're observant, you're careful, you can keep records, you can talk to people in difficult situations without making things worse. You should find work that uses them. A pause. "There are positions available in the alderman's office for a clerk's assistant. You can read and write decently. I've seen your notes." He slides a piece of paper across the desk. "This is the name of a man you should go and see. Tell him I sent you." You pick up the paper. "Why are you doing this?" you ask. Ezekiel Cobb picks up his quill. He's already moving on to the next thing. "Because the city needs people who can do difficult work and write it down accurately," he says. "And because the boy who came in here 7 months ago would not have lasted a week in a clerk's position. The boy who came in here this morning might actually be useful." He dips the quill. "Go and see the man on that paper, and don't thank me. Just do the work well. You go. Before you go to see the man on Cobb's paper, you go back to Swan Alley. You don't know why. Habit, maybe." The route takes you past the mouth of the alley, and you find yourself turning in. The house is not empty anymore. The red cross is completely gone. Faded, washed, painted over. The door is the same door, the same oak, but there's a fresh coat of something on it that has absorbed the memory of the cross. The shutters of the shop are opened. You can see through the front window that the shelves are no longer bare. Someone has stocked the shop. Not with the same goods, not ribbon on spools and buttons in jars in quite the same arrangement, but stocked. Someone is using this space. A woman appears in the window, young, maybe 25, doing something at the counter, arranging stock. She looks up and sees you standing in the alley looking at the shop, and her expression is the normal expression of a shopkeeper assessing a potential customer. She doesn't know you were here before. She doesn't know about the breakfast table or the primer or the brass buttons on the Sunday coat. She's just here now, in this space, doing her work, living in it, making it hers. This is what happens. This is what always happens. The city fills its empty spaces. The houses that stand silent for months fill again. The lives that ended make room for new ones that don't know them and don't remember them and aren't required to. London is 1,000 years old. It will be 1,000 more. The woman goes back to her work. You walk on. September 1666. A different catastrophe. You know it's coming before you smell it. Or rather, you smell it for 2 days before anyone officially confirms what it is. The smell of burning on the east wind. The particular smell of London burning that is unlike any other burning because of the density and variety and age of what is fuel. The Great Fire. It starts on September 2nd in a bakery on Pudding Lane in the early hours of the morning, and it will burn for 3 days and destroy 13,000 houses and 87 churches and the old St. Paul's Cathedral and most of the medieval city. You're in your clerk's position by now. You're 19. You spend the 3 days of the fire doing the work that needs doing, helping move records, helping citizens file emergency inventories of losses, helping the massive administrative machinery of a city in catastrophe do what it has to do. You are very useful. Ezekiel Cobb was right. On the third night of the fire, when the wind drops and the city stops burning, just stops like a candle snuffed, the fire finally running out of things to consume or finding a gap it can't cross, you climb to the roof of a building on Silver Street and look at what's left. Half the city is gone. The sky to the south and east is still orange with the glow of dying fires, embers, the long slow cooling of thousands of tons of ash and stone. The smoke is immense, a cloud that has been building for days, visible from Kent and Hertfordshire and across the Channel in France. And yet London is still here. The rooftops you can see, the churches in the north and west that didn't burn, the river. The river is still there, wide and cold and entirely indifferent to what just happened on its northern bank. Swan Alley burned. You don't know this with certainty that night. You find out later, when the boundaries of the fire are mapped, when the losses are tallied. Swan Alley was inside the fire's reach. The haberdasher's house with its oak door and its shelves of ribbon and its breakfast table. Gone. The woman who was running the shop from that space. You don't know what happened to her. Whether she got out in time. Whether she'd already taken her goods and run when the fire was still several streets away, which is what most people did. The sensible ones, the ones who didn't wait to see if it would stop. You hope she got out. You hope she took her stock with her. The wooden horse with the mended ear. The primer with the drawings. Those were gone already, of course. Those were gone the year before. Those went with the parish disposal of the house contents when no cousin from Bristol ever arrived to claim them. But still, you hope the woman got out. The city will rebuild. Already, looking at the sky, you know this. It's not optimism or sentiment, it's just what cities do. They burn and they flood and they freeze and they suffer and they rebuild. London has burned before, parts of it, smaller fires, great fires that seemed catastrophic in their moment and then became history. Christopher Wren will rebuild St. Paul's. You don't know this yet, standing on the rooftop in the smoke-orange night of September 1666, but you will know it. You'll watch it being built over the next 30 years, the dome rising above the ruins, visible from miles away, visible from the hilltop at Greenwich, from the Thames, from everywhere in the city. The new cathedral, grander than the old one, built from Portland stone the colour of good cream. The city will rebuild. The city will go on being a city. But tonight, in this night of orange smoke and cooling ash, the city is very quiet. And in the quiet, you think about what you know, about the things left behind when everyone is gone, about the objects that insist, the buttons in their glass jars, the ribbon on its spools, the primer, the wooden horse, about the woman who arranged 3 acorns equidistant on a windowsill because she was, in that moment, a person who cared about the arrangement of acorns, a person with a particular and irreplaceable mind that organised the world in a way that no other mind organised it. About Mary Ackerman's drawings, about the rabbit the size of a thumbnail, about the house with 2 faces in the windows. You think about all of this, and you think about the half-eaten loaf, and the porridge in the pot, and the cup on its side, and the account of Mrs. Henderson and her 4 shillings and 6pence that was never collected. And you think about the woman who lit the candle, who said, they were a good family, who said Mary made lace, who said she used to sit in that window of a summer evening. That woman knew. That woman saw. That woman holds the memory now, in the way neighbours always have and always will, in the way the people who survive are the keepers of the people who didn't. The city forgets. The city has to forget to function. You cannot carry all the dead with you every day. You cannot navigate the present weighted with all the specific particularity of all the specific people who filled these streets and then didn't. But somewhere, someone always lights a candle. Somewhere, someone always remembers. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. Come on, it's very late. The fire is out. The city is cooling. The smoke is rising in the dark sky, and the stars are coming through it, the ones bright enough to push through the haze, the ones that have been there above London for all of its 1,000 years, and will be there for all the years after. You're tired. Not just tonight tired. Not just September 1666 tired. Something deeper than that. Something that has been building since August 1665, and that has settled into the marrow of you, the specific weight of the work you've done this year and a bit. The 34 houses and the 73 houses and the mornings at Ezekiel Cobb's desk, and the afternoons alongside Margaret Fenn and the evenings on rooftops watching fires. That weight. It's not bad weight. It doesn't feel like damage. It feels more like the way a tool gets weight when it's been used properly. The way a wooden handle develops a sheen from the oils of repeated hands. It's worked in weight. You're not the 17-year-old who came to London from Hertfordshire to find his uncle, and found instead that the uncle was dead and the city was beginning to die. And there was somehow work to be done. You're not that person. You don't know exactly who you are now. You're 19. You're a clerk's assistant. You've been in 73 plague houses, and you've seen London begin to burn, and you've watched the rebuilding begin, and you've learned to wash your hands after hard days and to put things back where you found them and to keep moving when you don't want to keep moving. You're someone who does difficult work and writes it down accurately. That's what Ezekiel Cobb said. That's what you are. The sounds are coming now. Not from outside. Outside is the unusual quiet of a city that has just burned, a city catching its breath, a city that will be very loud again tomorrow and the day after, and all the days of its rebuilding. But tonight is quiet. The sounds are from inside, from memory, from the particular archive that you carry now whether you want to or not. The bells of St. Giles Cripplegate, which were the first bells you learned to identify by sound, which rang over the worst weeks of the worst summer. They're still ringing. They'll ring tomorrow. The sound of Margaret Fenn's voice, flat and professional, saying, "Door," saying, "Don't linger," saying, "The work is separate from the sadness." The sound of Mary Ackerman's primer, which doesn't really make a sound, which is a book in a chest that was cleared by parish workers months ago, but which you can still open in your memory and find the rabbit on its page and the careful, not quite confident letters of a child learning to write. Mary Ackerman, her book, 1664, the sound of the neighbour across the alley who said, "She used to sit in that window of a summer evening, the candle she lit. These sounds, you're warm enough. The night is warm, or was warm before the fire took some of the heat out of the sky. It's September, but it's not cold yet. The cold will come with October, the cold that will take the last of the plague, the cold that will let the city breathe. You're warm enough, safe enough, alive enough. You have a roof, you have work, You have skills that the city needs, and a man named on a piece of paper who knows your name. You have the weight of what you've seen, which is heavy, which will always be heavy, but which is yours now. You've earned this rest. Take it. Let the sounds go. Let the bells stop. Let the smoke clear. Let the objects settle. The blue ribbon on its spool. Still blue. Still there in the memory of the shop it came from, or in the memory of the hands that wound it. The 3 acorns arranged on the sill. The rabbit the size of a thumbnail. Let them be. They don't need you to carry them. They carry themselves. That's what objects do. The ones that mattered. The ones that were touched and used and arranged and loved. They carry themselves through time in the memories of the people who found them. You found them. You saw. You put them back. That's enough. Centuries will pass, and this London, the one with the red crosses on the oak doors and the plague fires in the streets and the night carts rolling and the Bills of Mortality printed on Thursday mornings, this London will change beyond recognition. The streets will be paved. The street lights will come. Gas and then electricity. The fires the Lord Mayor ordered will be replaced by 1,000 other forms of light, and then 10,000, until the city glows from above like something that cannot stop. The plague will not come back. Not like this, not. With the red crosses and the sealed houses and the searchers with their white wands and their herb bundles. St. Paul's will be rebuilt and will stand for centuries with Wren's dome catching the morning light, exactly the way the old cathedral did, the way buildings here have been catching morning light for 1,000 years. Swan Alley will be rebuilt. The house on it will be rebuilt. The space where the haberdasher kept his buttons and his ribbon will be filled again, and then filled again, and then filled again, each filling a little different, a little further from the original, until the original is a matter for historians and the kind of people who find pleasure in the past. But people will still live in London, still work here, still eat breakfast on Tuesday mornings, still arrange things on windowsills, still light candles for their neighbours, still carry the weight of difficult years in their bodies, in the particular density that comes from being alive in a hard time, still lie down at the end of a long day and let the sounds of the city wash over them, softer and softer, and let the thoughts slow and let the eyes close. Some things don't change. The human body needs rest. The human heart needs to know it did something useful. The human mind needs, at the end of the long catalogue of what was lost and what remains, to rest. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Thomas Marsh in his room on Silver Street in the autumn after the plague year, when London was beginning to breathe again, and the great rebuilding was beginning, and somewhere in the cooling city the last of the plague fires were dying down to embers. Let the objects settle, let the doors close, let the searches end, let the bread stay on the table, and the primer stay in the chest, and the wooden horse stay on the windowsill, with its mended ear catching whatever light is left. Let the city breathe. Let the city sleep. Let yourself sleep. You've done the necessary thing. You went through the door. You saw what was there. You put things back. That's enough. That will always be enough. The bells are very distant now. The smoke is clearing. The stars are coming through. Good night.